Hello and welcome to Keto Updates in 2024. What is new this year with keto that you need to know that we want to make sure you know? My name is T. Cadron, and I will be orienting you tonight to this information. And we are just starting off by those of you who are here just typing into the chat your name, where you're tuning in from, and what you want to get out of tonight. And if you are listening to this as recording, I think it's also important for you to think about, okay, what am I listening for tonight? Like, what is my objective? Why am I tuning in? Because one of the things that we are so clear about with the brain is that what we retain and what we hold on to is directly related to the frame that we bring to that conversation or that listening. And I just saw Lila jump up and grab a notepad, and anybody who feels like they learn better. Yep, Claire's got hers, and Victor, I know, does that. Please feel free, I'll have some notes for you guys, but feel free to also take notes. And welcome to Shamala too. It's so nice to see some of you who I haven't seen in such a long time. What a pleasure, what a treat to have you all jump on for one of these programs. So tonight is the first of two of our free master classes. So both of them are going to be about what's new with keto in 2024. And the first one tonight is going to be an overview of what's new. And what I call what we're going to do tonight is related to what I will call the Keto Toolkit. So it is a combination of eating in our Keto Cleanse manner, but also the tools that go along with that. And the tools can really be used with any eating style. So even if you are not a fan of the keto diet or don't feel like that eating style is for you, tonight you're going to come away with some tools that you can actually use for keto for any eating style. So that's a really interesting update that we're going to talk about tonight. And then next week at the same time, and if you are registered for tonight, you're registered for next week, it'll be the same link. We're going to talk about really practical tips and shortcuts and really case studies for success around keto from our real students. So I'll do some interviewing. We'll talk about like literally what do we eat, when do we eat it, how do we use, the different components that I'm going to talk about tonight, and how has it worked out for people. And then following these two classes, we're going to go right into our Keto Cleanse program, which is our 4-week-long series where we really will delve into everything that we go through in this week and next week and really put it into use, like actually go through the program together and get that weekly support that you'll grow accustomed to, hopefully, during these two master classes. So to Jinder and Shamala, anybody who just joined in, hello, and go ahead and type into the chat your name, where you're tuning in from, and then your why, like your reason for tuning in tonight, what you hope to get out of tonight. And that will really help us to get centered around what we expect from tonight. So Liz on mute from Campbell, hoping to learn more about keto. Liz, you're going to get that for sure. Lila Flagstaff, just always refining and up-leveling her keto and lifestyle skills. I love that. Lila is a coach doing nutrition and training and other things. So I love that we're always learning, right, Claire, right, Lila? It's like we're always learning, always up-leveling. One of the things that will keep you on your toes with nutrition is you better not get too attached to one way of doing something, because some new research might come in, or your body might change, or something might happen, and all of a sudden, you need to be able to update. So being able to really understand how that works, how your body is your own science experiment, is such a vital piece. Claire from middle of nowhere, Central Utah. Here to determine, what she's going to keep with keto as she maintains her weight. Such a great goal for that. And then go ahead and type in the rest of you all, except for Jen Weddle, who's driving, kind of what you're hoping to get out of tonight. All right. Now, I think I pretty much know all of you who are on tonight, but for anyone listening to the recording who might not know me, I am the founder of Vitality Wellness, and I have been inventing and teaching nutrition and lifestyle classes for over 20 years. It's hard to believe that it's really been that long. And over the past, I would say 10 years, we've really started to tune into what works for people over 40. And as I have past 40 and 50, I've really found that what is true for the younger body, it definitely needs to be modified for the older, maturing person. And so part of what we're going to talk about tonight is how these skills and these tools that we're going to talk about, how they apply when you're over 40, which is slightly different than how they might apply earlier. And also part of what, Claire, you are so sweet. And also part of what makes nutrition and weight loss such a challenging subject for so many of us. So I have some slides that I'm going to share with you all tonight that have just a few highlights on them. And, you know, I just want to start with kind of some observations about keto as a eating style, as a lifestyle, about whether it's, you know, could it be the right one for you? And what I will say around this is that over the many years that we've added the keto eating style to our options for teaching people how to eat, one of the things we found is that it really works for people who have very strong carbohydrate cravings. So these are things for like bread and pasta or sugary treats, and they find that they really can't eat them in moderation. So what we've noticed is that there is really a spectrum of how attached to the more processed carbs people are. So some people are the more moderate types where they could have, say, a cookie or a few bites of rice or some berries, whatever that is, and feel satisfied and not have any change in their urge to eat or their hunger, or their cravings, et cetera, from that. And then there is the other group, and I fit further along the spectrum myself, where we eat carbs and we find that they actually fuel more carbs. And for me, it's the processing in those carbs that really does that. So the more I stick to whole foods, the less I have those cravings. But when I shift into things that are more processed, even things like, say, gluten-free bread, or sometimes things like rice or potatoes, sometimes that increases my carb craving. So you want to think about where you are in that spectrum. And the further you are to feeling like eating carbs increases your carb cravings, you may have what we call a carb sensitivity. And these tools tonight could really be life-changing for you. So related to that is if you notice that you eat a small amount of carbs and gain weight and other people don't. So this is one of the big things for people who join our programs, is that because we're really looking at how to personalize eating to you, what we find is that the people who join us are generally people who have tried lots of weight loss programs or lots of nutrition programs and really haven't found the one that is easy for them, that fits, that makes sense to them, and is something that they feel like they could do for life. And then once you do find that eating style, then you may become a part of our long-term community, like Claire and Liza and Jen, of people who are just always updating for themselves their own tools and their own bodies and what's happening, et cetera. So this is also, the Keto Toolkit is also really important if you have noticed that you're gaining weight primarily at your belly or in your hips and thighs. So certain areas, and sometimes those areas seem like they're resistant to weight loss. The other group of people that this may really appeal to are people who feel like their energy really fluctuates during the day. So these tools for keto can be really great for energy, and especially for sustaining energy. So if you notice that your energy gets low at specific times of day, especially after you eat, then this may be something that is going to be really helpful for you. And last and most exciting to me is the impact of ketosis and keto on the brain. So one of the things that is new in the research is the pace of research is just expanding. How many new studies are coming out, and so many of them are pointing to the impact of keto on the brain. And that's really exciting, particularly if you have any kind of focus issues, or just as we're aging and we're really thinking through like how much are brain related issues in my family, and what can I do actually to avoid that. So that's a really important thing. And you're in the right place if you checked off some of the things on that list, or if some of you are in our mastery program and you're just checking out what you want to use from this upcoming keto program. We're going to really highlight the different tools so that you'll have a really good overview. And in particular, if you're over 40 and really finding that weight loss and dieting are challenging and ineffective for you, and you want to kind of give up on dieting, you're in the right place. New to the keto diet, wondering what the hype is about, this is a great place to start, because I will give you kind of what we've seen over the many years that we've been running this program about what really works, what's really healthy, and what's changed over the years. Also, if you have been unable to follow keto because you've either found it to be unhealthy, found it confusing, found it difficult, we're going to hope to straighten some of those things out for you today. Also related, as we talked about, to the brain, or to burning fat, or getting results that other people aren't getting. And let me just pause for a minute. Claire, do you see the slides changing, or do they? Okay, good. Sometimes they don't change and I only find out later. So those of you who know me well, or really any of you, feel free to unmute and alert me if there's any kind of issues going on. So tonight, in what we're really going to focus on are these changes to the keto diet. And I would say the biggest change is this mental shift. And it's so funny that we called it what's new in the keto diet, because we're really going to be talking about what I would call the Keto Toolkit. And the toolkit is way more than the diet. So it includes things like fasting, intermittent fasting, ketone supplements, exercise, and you can use these tools independent of eating a keto diet. So as you're listening to this tonight, you can think about, am I a candidate for using some of these tools regardless of what eating style I want? Maybe because you have some of the issues that we talked about initially, or also because you're really looking to get some of the benefits from this state of ketosis. The reason that you should care about this topic at all, because I know for a very long time, I considered the keto diet to be one of the more unhealthy diets, and certainly not something that I would teach in my wellness programs. But what we have since found out is that the research is just pouring in about the benefits of having elevated ketone levels in the body. And I'm just gonna, I hear a little background noise on somebody's line, so I'm just gonna put you all on mute, but you can definitely feel free to unmute yourselves. And let me just go back to sharing. Okay, awesome. So that basically as the research comes in, that there's so many areas that it has a positive benefit in. In addition to the obvious things like weight loss and reduced sugar cravings, we're also seeing all of these studies on the brain, on, the inflammation studies are amazing. The way it impacts sleep, your ketone levels, all of these different things. So that's fascinating to me as a researcher and as an experimenter and someone who likes to try different things out and really find out what's best for me. If you were to follow the keto diet that you would find out on your own, say Google's version of the keto diet, there are lots of dangerous elements to it that are out there that say personal trainers are propagating, like different people that are out there that just kind of like have a view on it, are putting out there people that have had their own success. And these are not things that would be healthy for you to do and probably won't work for a lot of you, especially if you're women over 40. So we're going to talk about that also. And in general, about today's talk is really to sift through some of those nuts and bolts versus kind of the hype and the part where you might be sort of like trying to get away with something that actually might not be healthy long term, so that you have a better idea of that. And we're really going to be breaking down this idea of a keto toolkit so that you can separate out the eating style from the other tools to get into ketosis. So before I dive into, I was going to say the meat of the program, the veg of the program, hardy har har. And by the way, for any of you who are vegan or vegetarian, I myself am mostly vegan. I think Lila, are you still? You can chime in the chat. I know Claire is mostly, a lot of us are mostly plant-based. So we'll have lots of interesting information for you. And also next week, especially about how you could do our version of keto and also be vegan or vegetarian, or mostly that way, flexitarian. All right, so some key terms so that we're all on the same page. So first is the word ketosis. So ketosis is a metabolic state in your body where your body is primarily using fat for fuel instead of carbs. And this is partly what allows us to burn excess body fat, is this idea that we can go into this state called ketosis. Now, a ketone itself is an energy source that is made by your body when you burn fat. So whether it's the fat on your body or the fat in your diet, it converts into something called a ketone, and these ketones then serve as an energy source. The keto diet is a particular eating style that is high in fat, very low in carbohydrate, and moderate in protein, that is designed to put your body into a state of ketosis. And it is not new. It was designed over 100 years ago at Johns Hopkins University, particularly in a clinical medical setting, to help children with epilepsy who had seizures that were resistant to medication. And they found that this particular eating style had benefits to these children and would help reduce their seizures. And then since then, versions of it have gotten adopted. For example, Dr. Atkins has a version of a keto diet that many people use to lose weight. We have since at Vitality kind of stand against that version of the keto diet. We'll talk about why that is. But it's become really popular over the past about 8 years since the advent of ketone supplements and the ability to get yourself into this state of ketosis without having to follow the keto diet. And the reason that that's caused such a shift in thinking and in research is because when scientists had to use the keto diet to get people into ketosis to study them, then there were all kinds of issues with how long it takes to get into ketosis and people's compliance with the diet, et cetera. But now that there are ways to get people into ketosis that are independent of the diet, it spurred a lot of research and allowed us to really find out so many interesting things about the value of being in ketosis. And then, as I identified, we're going to talk about what I call the Keto Toolkit, which are various strategies and methods that will help you benefit from this state of ketosis and don't necessarily require following the keto diet. So that's kind of how we're going to start. Now, what I want you to think about is metabolically, your metabolism is like a hybrid car. And you can think of it at its basis level that there are two things that this human car uses for fuel. And those are carbs, which is kind of like our gas or the dirtier fuel that has some pollution associated with it, or the fat, and that's the fat on our body or the fat in our diet, which we can think of as a solar-powered, regenerating energy source that's very plentiful. And if I were to put some numbers on this in terms of stored fuel that we have in our bodies that would come from carbs, it comes from what you've recently eaten or what's stored in your muscles or in your liver. And at any one time, it's usually not a lot of fuel. So maybe something like 1,700 calories of stored fuel, not a lot. So enough theoretically to go on a very long hike or make it through the day, et cetera, but not so much. And what happens as you go through these carbohydrate stores is you hit the wall. In exercise, we might call it bonking if you were a runner. Or as just a person in our ordinary life, we might call it getting hangry, hungry and angry because we've run out of fuel, where we have that I need to eat kind of feeling. And this is where people who have the solar option, where they can use the fat on their body to make fuel, have up to 70,000 more calories of stored fuel. And this is not an overweight person. This is just an ordinary person. So look at the difference in that 1,700 versus 70,000. And this is the state that when people are on the show Survivor, that their bodies go into that state of basically being able to use the fat on their body for fuel. This is why, as long as you have water and you can sleep, that you can live a lot longer without food than you can without water or without sleep. However, here's the issue, is that most of us don't know how to get our metabolism to work like a hybrid car. So most of us are running around where our bodies primarily want and use carbs for fuel. So when we run out of that fuel, if we start to drop our carbs or forget to eat or don't eat or go out on a hike, whatever that is, exercise more, many of our bodies do not go into this solar powered burning of fat easily. And so it makes it very difficult to get into ketosis because of that. And so what we're really talking about today is, how do we actually become more dual fuel? Like, how do we help our bodies to get into that state of ketosis and make it easier for them to burn fat? Now, as I mentioned, the problem with carbs, they're sort of like a dirty fuel, is that as we age, a lot of us have more and more trouble using especially more processed carbs for fuel. So it can lead to degeneration in the brain. It can lead to diabetes, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, like all kinds of issues can happen, especially as we age with this. We now know from so much of the brain research that certain brains just do better with fat for fuel rather than carbs for fuel. But if your body metabolically isn't good at using fat for fuel, then the brain may never get it. So it's like this whole conundrum about how do we activate this ability of our bodies metabolically to use fat for fuel. We already talked about weight gain, sugar cravings. There's inflammation that results from our bodies, primarily some of us using carbs for fuel. Gut issues, people can become very sensitive to certain carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates that can promote an overgrowth of bacteria or yeast, and sleep problems. So there's inherently all of these issues, and these are much worse as we age. So it raises the question of, all right, well then how do I get this body to become more hybrid or to become what we call keto adapted, able to burn fat for fuel easily? And our Keto Toolkit consists of the keto diet, so the keto eating style, fasting and intermittent fasting, ketone supplements, and certain types of exercise. So that's kind of the overview that we're going to go through tonight. So just shifting gears for a minute, Lila, in general, why keto is helpful for people who may have like resistant belly fat, say at the belly or in the hips or thighs, is that what we know, and this is especially true as you age, is that just reducing calories and exercising more, which you would think would work for weight loss, like, and I know you know that it doesn't, but we would think that certainly there were many, many years in my youth where I thought that if I just exercised more, that I should lose weight, or where I thought that like 100 calories of jelly bean was equivalent to 100 calories of anything else. and then I could eat lots of jelly beans and then go teach lots of aerobics and that it would even itself out. And it didn't. And even that was even in my like late teen years, 18, 19, 20, early 20s, like in college. And so what happens is for some of us, that excess belly fat gets stored, say, in our bellies or in our fat, in our thighs and fat, and it's resistant to ordinary ways of losing weight. And in general, a lot of people are resistant to weight loss when, all of you know, when they don't detox. And that's something that we will not talk too much about tonight, but we may talk about more next week. But also if they're eating the wrong eating style for their metabolic type. So if somebody has been trying to lose weight, but still has extra fat in their belly or in their hips and thighs, then often changing their eating style, trying something like keto, will actually help their bodies to access those fat stores, because that state of ketosis, when the body's burning fat, the body's more able to liberate those fat stores that maybe were stubborn and wouldn't, the body wouldn't release them previously. They can when their body's actually in ketosis burning fat. Does that make sense? So, you know, for some people, they might be able to just go running and their stomach gets flat, say, from that. But I remember when I used to compete in triathlons that I thought it was amazing looking around at all these people who did so much cardio. They ran, they biked, they swam, and how much excess body fat people were carrying around in different areas, stomach, hips, thighs, etc., despite exercising for half their day for a lot of different days. And to your point, Lila, for some people, I think that the visceral body fat, which is that body fat around the internal organs in the belly, that's some of the most resistant fat, because metabolically, that's that area that can protect your internal organs from toxins and other things, because it forms that layer of barrier, basically. And so for some people's bodies, that's the area that their body is most resistant to get rid of. Yeah, and Claire, you can relate to that too, right? Ran 5 miles a day, dancing, never had a belly at all until this change in your metabolism. And then all of a sudden, your body's not able to burn fat as easily, and you could drop your calories way down and you might still maintain that belly. And that's like a very confusing thing. And I remember Jen Weddle talking about this too, how she's never been a person that has gained weight much in her belly, but then just in more recent years with stress, and this is partly a hormonal thing, all of a sudden her body started to gain weight in her belly. And for her, using the keto tools is a big part of being able to activate basically the body to start burning more fat and burn that belly fat. Okay, and Lila, you're vegetarian now, so eating eggs and sometimes cheese. Yeah, I think of it as flexitarian myself, where for myself, very limited meat, but occasionally some fish, very occasionally some eggs, very occasionally some cheese, usually like goat or sheep cheese. But I think that all of that is in a continuum. Okay, so just with what we've heard so far, let me just get some feedback either in the chat, or Lila or Claire, since you guys are on video, if either of you want to unmute and talk about it. Like, what stands out for you the most so far about what we've talked about? Whether it's, yeah, Claire, perfect. Love it.
Well, I made some notes because I've been in maintenance for more than I guess 2 years now. But I listened to those questions and I said, yes, yes, yes. What does this mean? I mean, and so one of my questions is about what, and I think you answered it, but I just want to validate that. If my body fat is 25% on the Tanita scale, and when, you know, it gives you your reading, it says healthy minus, which means that's on the low end, right? Then where is that? Is that fat having then to come 100% from the foods I'm eating?
So let me respond to what I think I understood, and then I think you're going to have to clarify for me from that question. So one of the things, this is sort of an advanced question, so maybe even Claire will table most of this, but I want to say that in Vitality, we love to use this particular type of scale called the Tanita Scale. And the reason we love it is because it's a science-driven analysis of your weight, which allows us to get all of this information about our metabolism. So even now that we run these classes remotely, a lot of us have our own home versions of these scales so that we can still get that information. And so what Claire's talking about is that the scale is telling her that her body fat is in the low healthy range. And so I think, Claire, what you're asking is if you don't say more about that. So, but what I was going to say is
what I'm asking is,
yeah, go ahead.
So let me just define my interest in being on the call was
yes,
that I'm finding that the tween diet is not working for me.
Right,
because,
from a weight loss standpoint, right?
And from a craving standpoint, because when I came out of keto, I didn't go into doing carbs. I just ate more food. And relaxed a little within the keto program.
Right.
And then last fall, I decided, let's try a carb or two, healthy carbs, right? So we introduced sweet potatoes and a couple of other things and fruit. And all of a sudden, a couple of weeks of that, and everything is back. And I've been yo-yoing, not outside of my 7-pound range, but I'm yo-yoing and I'm fighting cravings again. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not the weight, it's what's going on with the cravings that are making me sick.
I love that. And so what you're saying is like your body fat, is in a healthy range. And so it's not that you have this excess body fat. And I love what you're bringing up. And also relative to body fat, the scale gives us our ranking of our body fat based on our age. So because we're older now, it gives us lots of credit for our body fat. Like now it thinks like that I'm like muscular, thin or whatever. And I'm not a thin person. That's not actually my body type. Like I am muscular, but it's because of my age now. Because what it's rating with our body fat is how we compare to other people our age. So that's part of it, Claire, is we're getting extra credit for our age. So, but I love what you just brought up, because I think, Claire, you are a perfect example of someone who has a more carb sensitivity, right? Where you add these really good, high quality carbs. And of course, this is very similar to me. And we have these tipping points where it brings back not necessarily the weight gain, because we're managing that with the rest of our tools within this range. And that's part of our Vitality program. But it brings back the fact that we have to work really hard, because all of a sudden we have to resist these cravings. We're hungrier, all these kind of things. And in the Keto Cleanse,
willpower depletion, right?
Right. And also knowing you really well, the stress level in your life is so different now. It's so much higher, and your eating schedule is so much worse because of your work. And what's really interesting is that the timing of your food really impacts your insulin levels. So more than anything, when we shift to eating later, if we're not eating keto, then it impacts the way our body processes carbs. And it basically makes us more insulin resistant, and it's harder for our body to metabolize and use those foods. So, and then the thing about stress is that it shifts, our metabolism into this more stress metabolism, which again makes our bodies more sensitive to the shifts in blood sugar. So I think that combination really adds like fuel to the fire. And as you were thinking about it, I was thinking at the end of the keto program, we're going to talk more about carb cycling. And I think that is probably, at the end of the day, might be a better tool for you rather than just shifting your eating style, especially with the schedule that you have now. So like in the future,
really helpful.
Right? Yeah. In the future, when you are more accustomed, first of all, when you put your foot down and change your schedule, and then you're more accustomed to the way that your life is right now, then you might be able to go back to adding more of the carbs when your system is acting differently and you're eating them at the right time. So I think
Mhm.
that's part of what I find so fascinating and why this area of metabolism is so complicated, is because all of these different things come in and change how our own individual bodies process stuff. So, but I do think carb cycling, Claire, that might be the thing for you. So we will definitely get to that, not in the master classes, but in the program itself.
Well, and other people may find this too, but that carb cycling was at the bottom of my toolbox because I
Yeah,
needed it. And by the time I needed it, I forgot it was there.
right. Right? It's like maybe someday, maybe I'll use that. And then, right. And then the other thing about that too is there's a hint of like having to be moderate with carb cycling, in the sense that you might only carb cycle, say 1 day a week or 2 days a week. And so
Yeah.
that's a little bit like, okay, I'm going to open Pandora's box and then I'm going to trust myself to close it back up again. And therefore, like figuring out how do we do that in a way that mentally and physically makes that easy is like also a big thing. So I think for some of us, we think more in all or nothing terms, and it's worked better for us. So this idea of bringing something in sometimes is a little bit like that has a slippery slope to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Claire, for that share.
Thank
Lila,
you.
did anything jumping out at you that you wanted to share? Just in terms of helping people's learnings, like anything that you're like, yes, I remember that was really important, or now I see that, that kind of thing. She's thinking, I see her thinking. No, she can't.
I
Oh
mean, the
yeah.
thing I wrote down was was just that we are a hybrid car, hybrid car model with two different fuel sources. And I mean, are most of people here that haven't done keto?
No, I think it's across the spectrum. Like some of the people have and are or are coming back to it, and some of the people haven't. So I think everybody's like in a different place, really.
Yeah, I think with I mean, and what the hybrid car or hybrid vessel like
Yes, vessel, right?
insinuates is really that that switching, that which is carb cycling, right? Being able to go back and forth,
Yeah,
and really training, because I've gotten, like Claire and probably many of you, like, okay, in keto, like so long that it's kind of scary to leave it, and then you just do because it's kind of unplanned, and then um and then it's like, okay, now I have to like get back to that, and so
right.
it's like this. So I mean, that's really my practice right now, is
Yeah,
the switching,
yeah,
and
yeah. I
really
love that.
training myself to trust that I can switch back and forth
Right,
at when it works for me. And so
right, right.
rather than just getting like doing something, I'll tend to like do something as long as I can. And then so rather than doing it that way right now, I'm really
Mhm.
working on like the switching back and forth. So it's like I can do this and then I can do this. So
Yes,
it's kind of mental training too.
yes, it is partly mental, and I love that, Lila. And I think part of it also is like trying to parse out like what does my body prefer, and what do I like what does my lifestyle kind of want, or my mind want. Like sometimes those are different things. And I'm just going to put into the chat. I saw, Lila, thank you for doing that too. I saw that Shamala, you want to know which scale, and I just put into the chat the link to our website, which has the information about the Tanita Scale there, and it has a link there. And I love Liz is chiming in that she's never tried the keto diet. Tajinder's always done some version of our more balanced eating style. And that for her, you're such a great example of this. Having some carbs fights the carb cravings. So that's a really important distinction, is like, do the carbs actually help me fight my cravings, or do they increase my cravings? Like, do they make it easier or harder? And that's something we're always kind of tuning into. And what's interesting too about that is this idea of all carbs are different, both from a processing and how close to nature they are type of thing, as well as which ones work better for you. That's another piece of it, which I think is really interesting. Okay, so jumping back in, me get back to where we are. So I want to start by just talking about like, why do people think, and myself included, that the keto diet is unhealthy? Like, what are the kind of issues around that? The first and most important thing to me about it being unhealthy is the emphasis for some versions of it on inflammatory foods. So this is my beef with Atkins, is that the Atkins diet includes cow dairy, which we know to be a very inflammatory food. We know that it has an impact on the gut and basically on our body's lining, the gut lining, which is so important for processing nutrients and being able to absorb nutrients. And also it acts as a barrier to basically keep the bad bacteria kind of out of the places that it's not safe for that to be. So when we incorporate a lot of cow dairy into our diet, and people definitely have different sensitivity levels to this, we know that to be an inflammatory food for human beings. Adult humans, baby humans were designed to consume human milk. Baby cows were designed to consume cow milk. And by the way, that cow milk is meant to put hundreds of thousands of pounds on those cows. So it's a weight gain method, FYI. So, but no mammal of any species drinks another species' milk. That's, leave it to humans to come up with something like that. And it has a very inflammatory impact on human beings. So the other part of it is some versions of the keto diet, this is my beef with Atkins, overemphasize protein, which actually would not even put you into ketosis. It's actually one of those pitfalls of following something that you read out there. And they also may not make any considerations for how processed a food is. So for example, looking at some certain versions of the keto diet, they may saying to target this many grams of fat and this much protein, but not really accounting for the quality of that food. So whether your protein source is from a fast food restaurant, for example, is like fried chicken, is that keto because it's high fat? Those kinds of things. And then there is a real thing that people call the keto flu, which is this feeling of being unwell when you shift your fuel source from carbohydrates to primarily fat. And there's several things that are going on there. Like one is that your body is not equipped to change eating styles quickly. So Lila, as you talked about like the issues around changing, one of the things is our microbiome, which are the trillions of bacterial cells that help us with metabolism and nutrient digestion and absorption. They are custom to what we are eating. So when we've eaten in a certain way for a certain amount of time, we have exactly the right bacteria to utilize that type of food. So all of a sudden you shift into high fat from what has been a higher carb diet, and we don't have the right bacteria, the right enzymes to process all of that. The body needs to retool. So it's a good 4 to 6 weeks for the body to reaccustom to that. People can go much faster now with a variety of different tools that we're going to talk about. But when you think about it that way, it causes this period of feeling very unwell, where the body really has trouble getting a fuel source, basically, because it doesn't get enough carbohydrates. And that's the fuel source that it's accustomed to. The other issue is, as the body starts to burn fat, we talked about detox and visceral fat, is the toxins that the body produces and takes in through the environment and food and water get stored in fat. If they're not directly gotten rid of, detoxified, they get stored in our fat. So as you start to release this fat, if you are eating these inflammatory foods, not dealing with these toxins and detoxifying, then absolutely the body and the person can be very unwell. From a hormonal standpoint, some people, like Tejinder just talked about, she does better with some carbs in her system, some good high quality carbs. So hormonally, we can be at different places where some people's bodies and at certain different times need more starchy, high fiber carbs. And so this can cause moodiness, brain fog, all kinds of other stuff. Now, I like the question of how do you benefit from ketosis in the healthiest and easiest way for you? So let's separate this idea of evaluating the keto diet. So first, I want to say that there are healthy and unhealthy versions of the keto diet. So we absolutely have a healthy version of the keto diet that we call the Keto Cleanse. So that's number one. So if you're looking for a healthy version of how to eat keto, we definitely have it. It's very plant-based. It's pro-veggie. You're not counting carbs and macros and doing all this kind of stuff. However, even with a healthy version of the keto diet, it's not for everyone. So someone like Tejinder, who said having some carbs really helps her fight cravings, or maybe it helps her sleep or balances her mood, etc. Those are people who still might benefit from the state of ketosis. So some people's brains function better. We can get more stable energy, better moods, all of this kind of stuff. But how do we get there if the keto eating style isn't the right eating style? Is everyone following me in terms of this sort of content? Okay, awesome. And that's what's so cool at this stage in the research, is that you can go to that keto toolkit and extract some tools and get into the state of ketosis, whether or not you are eating keto. And that's kind of the theme that I want you to sort of pick up on. I'm still going to talk more about it tonight, but next week, we're going to delve into the tools very practically. Like, how do you, Claire, use this tool? How do you, Lila, do this? How has T done this as a vegan or vegetarian, et cetera? But I want you to start to separate those ideas from your mind, because it can be very helpful. And no matter what eating style you have, you can really benefit from some of these tools. So that's kind of the main thrust, sort of mentally, is to start to think of it that way. Okay, so the first thing is that you don't want to lose sight of this idea of what's healthy. So if you were adopting a keto diet approach, there is absolutely a focus on high fat, but we don't want to lose the focus on healthy. So one of the ways that people make this mistake that I alluded to is eating to something called macros and not to hunger. A macro is like the number of protein grams or fat grams or carb grams that you would have in a specific day. And if you were to say, all right, well, I need to get 70 grams of fat today, but it's 6 o'clock and I'm really not hungry, but I'm going to eat these, quote, fat bombs because I have to get my macros up, that's ridiculous. And I know that part of you, if you were doing that, and as you would do it, you would think to myself, this is ridiculous, but this is what people are doing out there. This is what it takes to get into ketosis, and it's ridiculous. So we don't want to overrule our body's biology, which is being able to help our body identify when we're hungry and when we're full and what we crave and when we're satisfied. So first and foremost, what I think we all want is for our human body and mind to function at its best, and for us to be satisfied and for it to be easy. So we don't want to overrule our biology that way. We already talked about including these inflammatory foods or overeating protein. And all of this, even if you were doing everything right, there still is this issue of getting into and out of ketosis, which Claire talked about, Lila talked about. It's an issue, the keto flu, all of this this is a thing that makes it difficult. So what you want to think about is ketosis and getting into and out of it. It's like an airplane, where the most difficult part of an airplane ride is basically the takeoff and the landing. And that's the same thing with keto, is basically how to get into it, especially if you've never gotten into it, or if your diet has not been very healthy. And then to Lila's point, like maybe she wants to be out of it for this period of time, this event, this vacation, whatever, how to get out of it and not have it rebound back and have weight gain and all these other issues happen. So tonight I'm going to go through a few tools, high level. We're going to talk about them. And then next week we'll delve into their practical use. So the first tool, ketone supplements, so thrilled about the use of ketone supplements. And this is truly why at Vitality, I decided to teach a keto eating program, was because I was so excited about this ability to drink ketones, which are they have the bioidentical form of what your body produces, and be able to get yourself into a state of ketosis within 60 minutes. And that your body could then be there for 3 to 5 hours. So although we don't have time to go into it tonight, some of the benefits of being in ketosis include having fuel for a brain that doesn't run well on sugar. So if you're feeling brain foggy, when you're in ketosis, for a lot of people, their brains can really function better. Or as Claire mentioned, being able to have no cravings, like not feeling hungry, like not being ruled by food. All of these are benefits to being in ketosis. Being able to work out on an empty stomach without feeling like you have to eat first. All of these are benefits. So the idea that you could actually use a supplement to help you get there is really intriguing, very important, something that is absolutely worth learning about. And we use a particular brand. Our link is drinkyourketo.com, and I will put some links into the chat with some of the particulars that we have used in our classes and that we really like. And then we'll go through these in more specificity next time. But for anybody, Claire, Lila, whoever, who's used any of these, you guys can feel free to chime in on the chat or chime in at the end of this and share kind of your experience around that. But I just put those into the chat for now. So that's tool number one. And what's so great about ketone supplements is, let's say you're following the keto diet and you're going on vacation and you're going to be having, say, smoothies by the pool that have fruit in them or whatever that is. You can use your ketones to keep yourself in ketosis. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is that if you are going to carb cycle, but you don't want to get bumped out of ketosis, you can use those ketone supplements both on the day that you're carb cycling and also the next couple of days to get yourself more quickly back into ketosis. And then for anybody that is new to the keto diet, this is the greatest thing. I was going to say the greatest thing since sliced bread. So inappropriate for a keto class. Anyway, this is the greatest thing ever, because that 4 to 6 weeks that it would take to get keto adapted, if you don't have a foundational eating style that gets you into ketosis, you can get there right away using these supplements. So, and what they found is that because these are things that your body produces on its own, you're adding something that the body already understands that the body makes itself. So the body will either absorb it or get rid of it. But it's one of those things that when we're doing something bioidentical to something the body already does, we can have a lot of confidence in that. All right, tool number 2, intermittent fasting. So good old Johns Hopkins has done a lot of research on this too. Also happens to be my alma mater for graduate school. Coincidence that they do all this research on this, but the intermittent fasting is a tool that is very good for the brain and the metabolism. And the idea behind intermittent fasting is that periodically, not necessarily every day, but periodically, you do a fast that's longer than your regular overnight fast. So if traditionally you'd finish dinner, say at 8:30 p.m. and wake up the next morning and have breakfast at 7:30, instead of those 11 hours that you would normally fast overnight, that you increase that amount of time. And you would do it intermittently. So not necessarily every day, but periodically. So that might be a few times a week. Maybe for some people it is every day, but that there's lots of benefits from that. And it doesn't have to be say a water fast for 5 days or something like that, which have many benefits, but can be very difficult and very traumatizing, right, to people mentally and physically. So some of the tips, we're going to go into this way more next week, is this idea of eating when you're hungry and not just because you're eating first thing. And this is a big change in our own programs at Vitality that we've instituted over the past 8 years. As we used to say that because a lot of people ate most of their calories in the evening, we would say, you know, get your metabolism going by eating within an hour of waking up, unless you're exercising first thing. And that this would basically help your body get into this regular rhythm so you don't overeat at night. But what we found is because there's such a benefit to intermittent fasting, that for a lot of people, a better way of thinking about it is to eat when they're hungry and to use that fasting period, say in the morning or in the early evening, if you finish eating earlier, as a time where you can consume beverages. You can even add fat to a beverage or ketone supplements that'll still keep your body in this fasted state metabolically, but make it very easy to be in that. So we will talk more specifically about how each of us has used intermittent fasting next week, but this is a wonderful tool. Doesn't matter what your eating style is. This is a tool I like to use on vacation. So when I am going to eat late at night, say I was in Spain eating dinner at 9 p.m., then this is a wonderful tool that the next day I don't have to go out for croissants in the morning. I can have lots of beverages the next day, wait until I'm actually hungry, and give my body more of a chance to fast and to reset itself. Okay, tool number 3 is exercise. So while exercise is not required to lose weight, and it's not something that we recommend you start with if your goal is weight loss, it is a great tool in the Ketosis Toolkit. So when you exercise in a fasted state, so that could be exercising, say, in the morning before you break your fast, as an example, or after dinner, adding a walk to your evening, as an example, as you're starting your fast, etc. That these things radically alter the way your body consumes and activates its blood sugar. So I had a really great time when I wore a continuous glucose monitor that was constantly giving me my sugar levels, and seeing the impact that exercise, fiber, intermittent fasting had on my blood sugar. It was fascinating. And in particular, the impact of burst training, which are these short intervals of more high intense exercise that's more suited to each individual. So what I think is high intense could be different from what Lila thinks is high intense for her body. So it's suited to your body. Can have a dramatic impact on your blood sugar and then on your fat burning. So this is an incredible idea and concept, and something that is another great tool to pull out of the toolkit. Using ketone supplements during exercise or before exercise is an even bigger aha kind of idea, because if you're not accustomed to working out in a fasted state, your body may bonk, as we talked about, not have enough carbs. So giving your body these ketone supplements as fuel while you exercise is fabulous, like such a game changer, really terrific. So when I used to dance pre-COVID, ketones, oh my gosh, we would dance for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours into the night, into the morning. And the ketones were incredible for that. Now I use them to fuel my pickleball practice. So it's just a great tool. Tool number 4 is to keep it anti-inflammatory. So this is relating to people who are implementing versions of the keto diet. We'll go more into this next week, but say no to industrial meats. Like, don't fall for the idea that like Kentucky Fried Chicken is keto, okay? Or this is the California one, that an In-N-Out burger on lettuce is keto. It might be, but it's not healthy keto. It's not, we like to call it T keto for me, T keto, but it's not what we call Keto Cleanse or Keto Clean. So cow dairy, I gave you my spiel on cow dairy. You really want to limit that or exclude it if you want it to be anti-inflammatory. And then you cannot remove low carb veggies. So one of the real hazards of counting carbs is that veggies have carbs in them. So this may be like a new concept for people because in general, in the lexicon, when we talk about carbs, we're talking more about like bread or pasta, like that's how people think of carbs. But actually, vegetables are carbs as well. They just happen to be high fiber, low carbs. And if you were counting carbs, you would realize this and then think a lot of people do, oh, I need to limit my vegetables to put me in the right macro level to be in ketosis, to have the stay under this particular amount of carbs. Well, that's going to be very bad for you on many levels, bad for your digestion, your microbiome, your health, your, all kinds of stuff. And also what we found is that you can have loads of low carb veggies in your diet, high fiber, and still be in ketosis. So these are not, all carbs don't count the same, back to my first thing. And all these three things are particularly important if you're over 40, because industrial meats, cow dairy, removing veggies, these have super detrimental impacts to your hormones. And as you're over 40 and your hormones are changing and shifting, this becomes a really important thing to balance, basically. All right, tool number 5, coming out of keto. So you have decided that you don't like eating keto anymore. You really miss, okay, this comes up in our classes a lot. I really miss the summer fruits, or I think my body really wants like some quinoa or some potato, or, something like that. Like we're not just wanting to be frivolous, but we're actually wanting to change our eating style and incorporate a wider variety of foods. Or we really want to be frivolous. I'm going to go on vacation. It's my birthday. I'm going to eat chocolate cake, like whatever it is. If you binge on carbs and you've been keto and you binge on the more processed carbs, this is a recipe for extreme weight gain, crazy weight gain. So when people do bodybuilding competitions and they cut their carbs down really low, they dehydrate themselves, they do all these kinds of things right before the competition to make their muscles really stand out. Right afterwards, there's a binging culture. People go out, eat a whole pizza, eat burger, fries, milkshakes, whatever, and gain so much weight, like 10, 20 pounds in a week, like crazy amount of weight. Because when you've really restricted carbs and then you go out and binge carbs, your body wants to gain weight as quickly as possible. So this is a disaster. And it's also why any of us who have been in diet cycles where we've restricted, deprived, and then busted and binged, this is a terrible recipe for extreme weight gain. So at Vitality, one of our whole things is to take a stand for your sustainable weight loss. And that means we have to figure out how to get out of this restricted deprivation cycle to start with. We can't be in that cycle. Even if we want to be, quote, be there to lose weight, we can't, because we don't want to follow that up with this binging cycle. So figuring out how do we make this sustainable, super, super important. And then, as I mentioned before, using ketone supplements as you're coming out of ketosis is really important for leveling back your metabolism. So what happens is when you deprive yourself of carbs, it's like being in a dark cave, and your body's metabolism is like at a different level. And then all of a sudden, the cave, the stone comes free and the light is in there and you're blind, like your body's not ready for all those carbs to come in. You have to like get your body ready for it. And it reminds me of the Tesla. Tony has a Tesla. And when we go to charge the battery, we have to condition the battery to be charged. You have to start that early before you get there. And it helps the battery to be able to take on a charge. Well, we have to condition our body to come out of ketosis. So we'll talk more about that next week. All right, so I'm gonna pause here. Those are the 5 tools in the ketosis toolkit. And then let me look at our questions here. And yeah, the keto up cans, Lila, it's so interesting you said that. I have to add this to the list because I have another client who loves them too. And she says, this is the same brand that we use, but a different type. She says they're much less sweet and that Do you find that too, that they're less sweet than no, you don't find that?
No, I think I mean, but when I do the powders, I mix it with probably like 24 ounces of water.
Yeah, right.
So some of the cans are tart. Actually, I was comparing the ingredients. This one, the Arctic Blast, is a little more tart. Root beer is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's probably more of the sweet. Then like the cherry, the red ones are really sweet.
All right. So Lila, if you can be on next week, this is going to be, you've got to bring those back. This is exactly what I want to get into, is like the nitty gritty. If you can't, you've got to send me a detailed text so that I can share.
Okay.
And I'll add the link to those links, because I've heard such great feedback on that also. And then Lila said, do you recommend delaying breakfast eating when you're hungry? Is that right? Oh, wait a minute. You're saying, do I recommend delaying it when you're hungry?
Do you recommend intermittent fasting if you're not eating keto?
Yes.
Like, because I remember on the original cleanse, it was like
exactly
to kickstart your metabolism. So if you're not doing keto, does it have a negative effect if you intermittent fast?
So that's really what's new, is we're pulling out intermittent fasting as its own tool, independent of eating style. So there are benefits to intermittent fasting no matter what eating style you have. Even if you were eating vacation crap food, there'd be a benefit to intermittent fasting the next day. So we want to think of intermittent fasting sort of like exercise almost. Like it puts a little strain on your metabolism and on your brain in a way that causes really beneficial changes to your metabolism. Now, the downside of intermittent fasting is we cannot be like nails on a chalkboard, dying as we're trying to get through it, because that would cause an increase in cortisol, and it can also cause us to overeat at the next meal. So next week, we'll get into the nitty gritty of how we do this. But yes, I recommend it for any eating style, but I recommend that you tune into when you're hungry to eat and make sure that you're ready at that point. So you don't go too far with it. Like some people will be like, I've got to get to 18 hours, but it's really stressful and it causes them to feel like they need to binge eat when they reach the end of that. And then what Lila asked me, what's the water inflammation gain question?
You were talking about bodybuilders.
About why they get, I know, right?
Yeah, is that inflammation?
So yes, I think there's a huge aspect because of the dehydration, because they literally dehydrate, because the water and the fluid tissue around your muscles can keep you from seeing all the definition in a show. So they'll dehydrate. So yes, a big part of it is inflammation, water gain, and then also just the body's so unaccustomed to the carbs and processed foods that it holds it as fat. Basically, it holds it as weight, I should say. And the problem is it can become permanent. Any inflammatory weight gain can become permanent weight gain if you don't immediately take it off. And in that culture, it's more of a culture of like extremism, which is similar to the diet culture, I want to say, which some of us can relate to. And that's why it's so hard to take off weight versus when you're in vitality mode and you're like looking week to week and you're vacationing and then looking immediately where you are, figuring out if it's inflammatory and then making a course correction, then it's really easy. It doesn't get stuck on you, basically. So, but yes, it's definitely has something to do with that. And then, okay, kombucha. Tejinder, this is such a great question. I'm a huge fan of kombucha. I love it. And the next week, let's talk more about it. My biggest advice, which is a little bit crazy, is that you brew it yourself. Because I became a crazy house for kombucha, like so much kombucha brewing in my house. But if you brew it yourself, you can brew it longer so that it truly eats off most of the sugar, and it has a tartar, more acidic, vinegary taste to it, but that is still delicious. So in that sense, it can work really well for keto if you brew it yourself. Otherwise, what you want to do is you want to avoid, like for example, the brand of Synergy, because the Synergy one has just juice added to it, as opposed to You know, I need to get into this next week because it's so, what I'm about to is going to be like a deep dive into the nitty gritty of kombucha. So, but it's basically has to do with whether the kombucha bacteria is eating up the sugar or whether it's added afterwards. So if it's eating the sugar and the juice is used as part of the fermentation process, then that decreases the actual sugar you're consuming, versus if they add the juice after fermentation, then it's like you're adding juice, which would be a problem for keto. Like fruit juice would be a problem for keto. So I'm going to add that to my questions for next week and we'll go into it. Now, I just have 2 minutes left tonight. So the last thing I just want to mention to everybody is when you attend a masterclass, we do give you a $200 coupon to be able to join our keto program, which is going to be starting up at the end of April. So it is 4 coaching classes with me and 1 mastermind class where you share as a group and based on building community. And it is a wonderful way to get into the practicality of everything that we learned tonight and apply it to yourself and really have a structure basically to go through it. So Keto Cleanse, oh yes, fruit and absolute no on keto. Oh my God, the good questions coming in at the end. So ketocleanse.com is where you register for the program. And oh my gosh, my alarm is going off. And the code is Keto 2024, which will give you $200 off the program. So we will go into that program way more next week. So, and also, let me just put my phone number into the chat here. People think it's kind of crazy that I do, but nobody abuses it yet. And if you're thinking about the keto program, please feel free to text me. I am more than happy to talk about it and whether it's a good fit for anyone. And I'm going to just put a link to it into the chat so that you guys have that right there. Okay, so to finish then, to sum up, next week, we're going to go into the practical tips and tricks. So I already have a couple questions, the fruit question, the kombucha question, a lot of good stuff. But we're going to go into how, as individuals, do we actually apply all of this? What works for us? What doesn't work? What are each of our own individual secrets? And this will be illuminating, like really illuminating to you guys. And then I will talk more about the upcoming keto program. And for people, mastery folks, beginning tomorrow, you will have access to the portal. So in the portal, there are all the video lessons that are already there, all of the documentation, so the food list, the recipe guide, all of that. Plus, we've broken out all of these Q&A sessions as well. So you'll have access to that beginning tomorrow to be able to not feel like you're in a rush, but just feel like you need to lean in. You could lean in. And then anyone, as you sign up, you will immediately get access to that portal. And all of the classes, the live classes like this, get recorded and uploaded to the portal. So if you can't be here live for whatever reason, you will have access to it. And then mastery folks, what we'll do is as this week and next week, and then the next 5 weeks, is there'll be a 5 o'clock session related to keto, and then a 6:15 session for mastery folks related to each of you individually, related to your progress and our coaching. So that'll be something we'll talk more about in a minute, but you can decide whether you want to do one or both of those sessions. And then for people in the Keto Cleanse program, you'll have that 5 o'clock call each week, similar to tonight, but with much more interaction. And then we will also be adding as a bonus 2 of our mastery calls, which are our coaching calls, onto that to give you like a little more continuation time and give me a chance to make the case for why that staying in coaching is such a beneficial thing when you're in the hunt for that sustainable weight loss. All right, so welcome to Sally. Hello. So our mastery class is about to start, but before we finish for tonight, I want to get some final thoughts. So what's a takeaway that you're taking out of tonight's program, go ahead and type it into the chat and then I'll read them out loud. And Lila and Claire, I'm happy to unmute the two of you to share your takeaway. And before we leave, I want to say one thing about fruit is that fruit is not an absolute no-no in keto. So it's just this idea that all fruit is created differently. And get this, it depends on where you are in your keto journey. So when you're first starting and you're trying to get into ketosis, if you're following the keto diet, there are some easier ways to do that than others, which could include like just removing all fruit. But later, when you're in ketosis, you can have a certain amount of particular fruits and not necessarily get kicked out of ketosis, especially if you time it after exercise and other things, because certain fruits are very high in fiber, and in small amounts, you will not necessarily get enough into your system that would kick you out of ketosis. But so it's very individualized, and it's definitely something we'll talk more about next week. So Claire, I'm going to unmute you for your takeaway. And thank you, Liz. I'm going to read yours in just a second. Okay.
Yeah, for two real important things. One was a recognition that I bought and used all of the supplements, not just one. I used the Nat, I used the cream, I used the Pro, all of them. And I know that that was a huge part of making keto work for me. At least for me, I went all in because for the first time using the supplements, I wasn't hungry.
Right.
And I was from eating all day long to, going into 1 or 2 meals a day. And it was amazing how much the supplements help. The other was, I did this, but I didn't realize how important it was when you're coming out of keto, increasing the carbs slowly. And I'm sure that contributed to me being able to maintain a healthy weight.
Yes. Oh, I love that, Claire. I love that. And I bet you that it had, even if you consciously didn't hear it that way, I bet it sunk in at some point so that, you know what I mean? So that you did it, even if you weren't as conscious of it. Oh, I love those. That's so wonderful. Thank you so much. And good luck with your work tonight.
Thank you.
Lila, what are your takeaways from tonight?
You said something about the takeoff and landing on a flight were the most difficult parts. And it reminded me of how much I love the takeoff and landing. Like, I love transitions. I love like the spaces between, even though sometimes, yeah, it can be rough, but just bringing that, remembrance into what I'm doing, whether it's keto or anything else. And remembering how that's I don't know, it's just like the change, the transformational part. And so just remembering that.
Oh my God, that's so cool, Lila. It's so you being such a proponent of transformation and change. And it's so counter to most people's inclination. Most people hate transitions, hate change. So it's wonderful to sort of bring that in and realize, hey, my whole life is oriented around, for you, change and transition and embracing it. And so therefore I could view my nutrition in the same light. I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Awesome. All right. And then Liz said she likes the part about how keto deals with gut issues and belly fat and inflammation. Yeah, nice, Liz. The research there is just incredible. All right. So thank you all.